Hi, I'm Rob Vanstone, and welcome to the milestone 30th edition of the Leader Post Rider Rumblings podcast. We've hit the big 3-0, Dirty 30. Anybody remember the great Jim Young? Joel is too young to remember Young.
Yeah.
Joel Gasson is our special guest today, 3 Down Nation contributor and general...
Doer of many things. Very prescient pundit and a friend. So thank you for being with us today, Joel. Oh, no problem. The bribe came through just in time, so we're good to go.
He played Here Comes the Bribe, and I delivered. So, oh no, these jokes. We're already a minute in, and not even a minute in, and these jokes are already bombing. So,
it wouldn't be a time with Rob Vanstone if there wasn't some kind of bad pun.
No, and
the way it is.
This is what you're tuning in for, folks. Or listening to. We've got myriad topics to discuss. It's odd. The off season would generally seem to be a down time in terms of football, but it seems like
Not this year.
It seems like there's as many things, if not more, to discuss during the off season. During the season, we can just say, well, the offense is boring and the defense is playing well, and we can do the same show every week.
You and I joked about that, I think, in the press box after every game this year. It's like, well, just take last week's column, change a few words, change the score, change the teams, and print it again.
Yeah,
because that's pretty much what the season was, right?
You change the name of who had the pick six and go on. And after a while, it seemed to be very formulaic. But after the season, suddenly there's even more issues that seem to pop up. And so let's tackle some of them. Tackle. It is a defensively oriented team we're discussing here. And that's part of the problem. They need a quarterback. Joel, what's your solution?
Oof.
5, 4, 3, 2.
Well, I think long term.
Tino Sinceri?
Absolutely, yes. Bring him back.
Sorry.
And Seth Daggy and Colt Brennan whoever else, right?
I liked Brett Smith, by the way.
He was a good guy.
He's
stand-up guy. Not really a great CFL quarterback.
He threw 15 touchdown passes, getting 38% of the snaps.
Yeah.
You extrapolate those totals.
He was in an offense where they, compared to last year's, actually let them do something.
Yeah.
Right?
Like Brett Smith would have been...
Brett Smith with that offense last year would have done even less than what Zach Collaros and Brandon Bridge were able to accomplish.
I think he would have done more.
I don't think so.
He actually was a better quarterback. I mean, just 15 touchdown passes and 38% of the snaps. So you're talking, if you extrapolate that over the entire season, that's rivaling the Rough Riders single season touchdown pass record. It's in the 30s. That's Ken Austin, Darian Durant territory.
Yeah, but 30% is a pretty small sample size. I don't know. I don't know if you can really say if he got all the snaps, if it would have worked out to that level of.
Well, it would have been better than the 11 that they threw this past season.
No, probably.
So anyway, I don't know how we got into this Brett Smith tangent.
I don't know. We were just talking about potential quarterbacks, and I think almost really the solution comes down to maybe not even the quarterbacks, but who's going to be running this franchise going forward, right? Because Chris Jones is heading into the final year of his contract again. So what's going to happen with him? Right? Because now this can go both ways. We don't know if the team wants him beyond this year. We don't know if he wants to be here beyond this year, right? It could be a completely realistic expectation that maybe he's at the point where he thinks he might have enough of a resume to get a pretty decent job down south. So maybe he's taking this as his final kick of the can. So then he probably goes all in on someone and tries to win. If there's a contract extension and both sides agree to it, then I think it's okay. You find... The general feeling seems to be, you've written it, I've seen it around other places too, a guy like Jonathan Jennings, who you take a flyer on him, maybe he turns out, maybe he doesn't, but at least he has some experience, and you groom the next guy. You keep throwing jello at the wall until something sticks, because that's pretty much all you can do in the CFL when you're trying to find a quarterback, really.
It's almost pretty much all you can do sometimes in terms of player recruitment, period, with all these one-year contracts. Mm-hmm. It's almost like the way it's evolving, and this year maybe somewhat of an aberration because of the CBA being up and players being reluctant to sign beyond the expiration of this deal.
I think that's playing a big part of it, especially some of the bigger guys. Like, obviously, Trevor Harris, Bo Levi Mitchell, Mike Riley, like, they all planned this, and they're very smart to do so, especially a guy like Mike Riley, who he knows his bread and butter is here now, and he said he's not signing until that CBA is signed because he wants to maximize his dollars, which is incredibly smart. Trevor Harris, someone will probably pay him. Bo Levi Mitchell, we know what's going on there. He's either in the NFL or he's back in Calgary next year. We all know that contract is already in Huff's drawer. Yeah. It'll just be signed and tweaked depending on how the CBA goes.
But it's almost like drafting a new fantasy team every year. At least that's what the CFL roster building process will be like in 2019. You're sitting down without picking numbers out of a hat, and signing free agents and redoing a huge portion of your team.
Well, there's well over 300 free agents this year.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, if you look at the rider list, is actually the smallest in the league at like 27 or something.
Yeah.
Like I wrote a piece for 3 Down Nation going over all of the players and whether they should stay or should they go and all that sort of thing. And I thought, oh, that was a long list. And then I saw the full list come out and I saw Calgary's. I was like, holy crap.
Yeah, some of them in the 40s.
It was basically a game day roster of free agents. Now, obviously, some other guys like Nick Lewis and some names on there don't matter, but it was still like, whew. So, yeah, it's a combination of things between the 1-year contracts, which the players wanted. And, I agree with that, but the league is having issues with that now in terms of player retention and building some kind of marketing within your market of your players, where if they're only signing 1-year deals, how is a team supposed to build any sort of cachet with the community with their players? So there's, you see the players side of it because they want to. It's funny, if you look at the CFL, they've wanted shorter contracts while every other league in the world is asking for longer contracts. But so it's tough right now, and it is leading to probably the most interesting offseason in CFL history, which makes up for, frankly, a pretty lackluster regular season.
It really does. I watched the CFL this past season and was generally underwhelmed by the entire product. The Grey Cup, there's been a lot of talk about the Grey Cup and the field conditions and all that. It wasn't a very good Grey Cup, but they've had ordinary Grey Cup games before in good field conditions. You look at the 2010 Grey Cup at Edmonton, Montreal beat the Riders 21-18. It was one of the most boring games ever played.
Yeah, I think
and that was on the same field. So you get those, but the season as a whole was humdrum.
Yeah.
I look at
I've had this conversation with friends this year and some other people and some of my compadres at 3 Down Nation. I'll be like, so point out how many games do you really remember this season? For me, the only one that really stands out is that one where Hamilton blew it in BC.
Yeah.
Like that was the only game where you had like those classic CFL moments and boneheaded coach decisions, which we can get into and how that affected what's going on in Hamilton now. And like it's just kind of a blasé kind of year. I don't know if everyone is just kind of waiting to see what happens this offseason, but it feels like in a sense that this league needs a shot in the arm. Something needs to juice it up again and get the games going again, because it doesn't feel the same. Like the games are fine. They're not like bad games per se. Like they're fun to watch at times, but there's nothing super memorable and amazing like you're used to seeing out of the CFL.
I think the league has lost its niche, and its niche once upon a time used to be a virtual monopoly on exciting, wide open football. Now look at what's happening in the National Football League. Look at American college football and some of the shootouts you get.
Yeah, Texas A&M and LSU the other day.
You're getting NBA scores in NCAA football, and if you're talking about passing prowess and phenomenal numbers, you're talking about Jared Goff, you're talking about Patrick Mahomes, you're talking about Drew Brees. Granted, there's more teams, and there's also dud games aplenty.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
On Sunday was full of dud NFL games.
Well, the whole day was basically useless until the Sunday nighter.
Except for Denver won. But sorry about your Steelers, Joel.
We don't need to get into that.
But the CFL, the NFL is doing what the CFL used to do or should be doing.
Yeah.
You look at the Patrick Mahomeses of the world and Jared Goff, and that's the Madden type football that's being played. You see some of it in the Canadian Football League, but I think you see predominantly more exciting aerial football being played in the States. And that's got to be a concern, because where's your niche if you're the Canadian Football League? If the NFL, I don't think it's much of a debate to say that it's arguably on par with the CFL in terms of excitement. And it might be a charitable assessment to the CFL. But the NFL is playing exciting aerial football right now, and that used to be the domain of the Canadian Football League. And if that's not your domain, what do you have as a niche?
Yeah, that's fair, but I think it can work in both leagues. And I think if the NFL continues on this path, and the NFL kind of goes through ebbs and flows, I think eventually it's going to get so pass happy that the defenses are going to adjust, and then a good offensive coordinators will realize that and start running the football again. Some friends of mine have talked about that, where it feels like that day will come again eventually. It might be down the road, but I think that might happen. But regardless, if it might be beneficial to the CFL if the NFL is still playing that style. Because then if you're one of those people who only watches the NFL and all of a sudden you watch a CFL game and it's the same, where they're both throwing up and down the field, maybe you're more likely to watch. Because right now, you can't compare the products in terms of football quality, because there is a difference in style. It almost feels like There's like an NHLification going on with the CFL right now, where it's, okay, we don't have the offensive horses we once did. The game is slowing down. The game is bogging down. Let's just muck it out on defense and win, 2-0, 2-1,
I was talking about this on Sunday while watching a lot of NFL at the Four Seasons Sports Palace. And it seems like the coaches all have the same playbook now. Mm-hmm. And you notice that, and I'm not saying to be critical of the CFL. You notice that in the NFL as well. But you look around the CFL, and I don't see teams with a lot of teams with an identity offensively. Paul Lapalisse tries a few things in Winnipeg, but by and large, it's the hitch screen, it's the bubble screen, it's the defenses are. It's tough to go over the top on some of these defenses now. You've got most of your international players playing on defense, which makes it tougher to go over them. But to me, it doesn't matter what CFL team you watch. It's almost the same playbook. If you're watching an NHL game, it's the same game. No matter, it can be Columbus and Nashville. It can be Carolina and Pittsburgh. It's the same style of game, and that concerns me. Where's Peter Lisk is going to throw the ball 50 times a game, or the Rough Riders are going to do this with Ronnie and George. Teams don't have identities anymore, and that to me is, well, I guess the Riders did. They had an identity of no offense.
Yeah, they were an exception. I think you could, if they stayed healthy, you could probably say Edmonton was one of those teams with Mike Riley. Like, they were clearly airing it out and trying to play that kind of style. But yeah, a lot of it is to do, I think there's a little bit of there's a quarterback thing going on in this league right now, where there's two guys and one guy kind of in the middle of that and everyone else, essentially. So again, everything comes back to quarterbacks, and it's just, I don't know. Maybe in a weird about way, everyone's talking about the threat of the Alliance of American Football is going to have on the CFL, and it's a legitimate one. There's definitely concerns there, but maybe there's a positive to be taken out of this too, where it's a little more increased competition. Or maybe it's, okay, we knew we weren't really a competition with the NFL, but now we're in competition with these guys. So let's make sure that our product's better than theirs.
And sad, sometimes that can make you better. You can fear the competition, or you can respond to it and make yourselves better and reinvent yourselves a little and assess everything. And that's what you have to do. I don't think the Alliance of American Football is going to affect the elite players in the CFL.
Well, we saw in that quarterback draft they had last week or whatever it was.
Marquise Williams.
There was a bunch of retreads that we've all seen before. So, and I get that from that league's perspective to start. You want to market you want to capture people's imaginations down there. So then you need to give them names that they know. If you pull some kid out of Middle Utah State that no one's ever heard of to be the starting quarterback for one of your franchises, no one's going to care, right? So there needs to be a little bit of that college cachet. So, okay, the quarterbacks in this league are probably fine. You're still going to find young quarterbacks. It's the other positions. And
it's that middle ground of the international.
We've already started to see it a little bit. There's been a few Canadians even signed down there. So,
is there a Middle Utah State?
No, that's just
I was about ready to order a hat.
That's just a made-up school that when I worked at CJME, Warren Woods liked to use as his example for NCAA schools. Now, there might be a Middle Utah State. I'm not 100% sure. Like, I can't confirm 100%.
And an A&M as well.
Yeah, but if they are not. They're probably in, like, Division 12 football and basketball. So
we've broached the topic of quarterbacks. You've talked about that tier at the top of the league. Yeah. Can the Rough Riders land a quarterback who is in that 1, 2, 3 category, or are they destined, as I think they are, to end up mining that middle ground again, as they did last year?
I think they're stuck in the middle. There's no shot at getting Bo Levi Mitchell. It depends on if you feel Trevor Harris is in that spot or not. To me, he's like maybe a notch below those two guys at this point, and not because of his playoff record, because I don't believe in quarterback win-loss record as a stat. I mean, he lost to Saskatchewan last year in the East semifinal, but played a whale of a football game.
Threw for 457 yards, and people are saying, well, gee.
He's a joke, but no.
Don't give up the punt return.
Yeah, he played a great game. So,
tackle Marcus Thigpen.
Yeah, but by all accounts, it sounds like him and Ottawa are really keen on getting something done there. So I don't know if he's leaving Ottawa. So that really leaves you with Mike Riley. And a lot of people say, the Chris Jones and Steve McAdoo connection. But I'm like, does he really like those guys?
Is that a positive or a negative? I can't assess whether...
Because if you look at Mike Riley's numbers, after McAdoo left Edmonton, they skyrocketed. Now, he won a Grey Cup with these guys, so maybe that's consideration. But I don't know if it's really in the cards. Now, maybe if Chris Jones has decided this is his last year in the CFL, he throws a 1-year stupid deal at him, sees if it works and goes all in and tries to win a Grey Cup. If you're trying to go, if he gets a 2 or 3 year extension, he has a little bit of wiggle room, then I think you go with a Jonathan Jennings, and maybe it's David Watford, maybe it's some other kid out of college that you try to groom into something that could be here for the next 10 years.
And I look at the pursuit of, or the anticipated pursuit of Mike Riley, and if the Riders are going to pay Mike Riley what market value is going to command, that's going to be at least $600,000. That's probably low.
Now, if the cap goes up to like, it's probably not, but if it goes up to like $7-8 million, then that's not a problem.
But then you're talking a $700,000 Mike Riley.
Yeah.
But let's say you spend a lot of money on Mike Riley, and Chris Jones being your head coach, you know that the defense is going to be a matter that's a priority. And you've got Willie Jefferson and Samuel Aguavin.
If they're not in the NFL.
If they're not in the NFL. You've got some defensive free agents to spend, and regardless, they're going to spend money on the defense. So if you're spending a ton of money on your quarterback, you know Chris Jones is going to make sure he's got a good defense. Again, we're talking about that middle ground. Riley money is spent. Defense money is spent. How much remains to put the kind of talent around Riley that would allow him to be Mike Riley?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where they got caught this year. If you look at 2017, okay, Kevin Glenn and Brendan Bridge in theory aren't better than Zach Collaros, but they got a lot more out of them because they were essentially paying 2 quarterbacks the comparison of 1 starting salary, and that gave them a ton of money to spread around the ball on offense. And I get the feeling that I don't, unless it is a 1-year scenario where he wants to go all in and win a Grey Cup on his way or the CFL, which I have no feelings about. This is what he's going to do. It's just an option on the table for him if he wants, right? Then I don't think Chris Jones wants to spend money on a quarterback. I think he wants to build a roster, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think you look, and I wrote columns on this in the past when I made the case for maybe Darian Durant shouldn't be back because they need to spend money elsewhere to rebuild this franchise. And they're kind of at that point again a little bit.
And Chris Jones talked several times about how the quarterback should fit into their salary structure. It came up a lot with the Darian Durant situation. It came up a lot in 2017 when they talked about, I believe Chris Jones told Ian Hamilton that they were spending $500,000 on their quarterbacks, period. And how does that liberate the rest of your spending?
Oh, it's huge. It was huge. We saw it in 2017 with the stack of receivers they had, where they frankly bailed out Brandon Bridge a lot and maybe made him look better than he was. So I think that makes a huge difference. And we go in this year, and the Riders are spending probably about $650 between their 2 quarterbacks at least. And then they had to cut all the receivers except Naaman Roosevelt. And they went with a bunch of kids who, some of them show potential, but we've seen that before. We've seen guys come in, have a decent camp, have a decent first year, and then fall off the map. So I'm not really getting too excited about all these guys just yet, because it happens a lot in this league where one guy has a really good year and then it just, for some reason, it doesn't pan out, or you see flashes of it, but it doesn't really sustain itself. So I think you need that mix of receivers who know what they're doing in this league and new guys. So if, say, in theory, you're next year, just to pick names out of a hat, you're going with Jonathan Jennings and David Watford as your quarterbacks, because I don't know, maybe they do, maybe they don't. The Riders believe in David Watford, in theory, in this hypothetical situation. So you're paying them both probably. Jonathan Jennings is not going to get much on the market this year. David Watford's still on his minimum deal, so you're paying your quarterbacks maybe $300,000, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, you're
just crazy math.
Quarterbacks.
So then that frees up another like $300,000 to spend on the rest of your defense and offense, plus whatever cap increase you get this year of the CBA. So then maybe you have a Naaman Roosevelt. You go after, maybe you take a flyer on a Manny Arsenault to see if he still's got something there, because he's probably done in BC.
You've got Jordan Williams-Lambert who can play.
Yeah, so there's your young guy. Maybe you keep Shaq Evans around, give him another, see if he progresses.
Another year of 0 touchdowns.
And then you find some other, maybe, you find some guys that are around this league a little bit.
But look at all these free agents.
Oh, yeah, you're going to have the pick of the litter this year. And so I think that's the way to go. And you've seen a lot in the NFL too right now with that sort of philosophy. Not in the same degree where they go out and search for these quarterbacks, because it's a very different world down there where you draft franchise quarterbacks. And now the rule is basically, if you find your franchise quarterback out of the draft and you're paying him his rookie minimum now you go all in to try to win a championship. You saw it in Philly last year. You're seeing it with the Rams right now. You're seeing it with the Chicago Bears a little bit. Those people feel they're about a year away. And so you have this cheap quarterback that you're not spending in the NFL $30 million on. So you go out and you get Khalil Mack. You go out and get these guys and make their team so good around him that it elevates him. and leads your team to a championship.
And there's just so many variables at play in trying to build this team. Yeah, fewer than other places. If you look around with the free agency, the other factor is going to be the timing of the negotiated CBA with respect to the free agency deadline.
What's your feeling on this year? Like the CBA is it's the elephant in the room right now.
Yeah,
like February 15th, I think is going to be a very dull day.
I can't see them getting it done before then because
not a chance.
There's neither side really has a lot of leverage in February.
No one does. None of these in any industry get done before or after the deadline.
So it could be absolutely ridiculous in February, especially if everybody's waiting on Mike Riley. Yeah. And whether you get Mike Riley dictates a lot of your other spending. If there's no CBA in February, March, April, are we sitting around just waiting for them to make their decision before everybody else makes their decision? Yeah. And there's just all sorts of limbo going into training camp. If they don't you've got to get this deal done by mid-February.
Yeah. And I've thought
from
about
a practical perspective.
I've thought about that scenario too, where there's so many free agents on the market right now, and how many of them are waiting for the CBA. If you're some guy in the middle,
you know what you're going to get. Yeah, if you're a $60,000 player, you know you're a $60,000 player.
So if you're some guy in the middle, why not take your minimal raise, sign a 1-year deal, and try to cash in on the CBA next year? Because it's going to be such a glut, it's going to be such a crush to try and fill out these rosters and I think was smart enough part like Marcus Thigpen. He saw the writing on the wall and said, I could wait this out and maybe get an extra $5,000 now, or just sign my deal now, maybe have a good year and get more next year under this new CBA. Because unless you're Mike Riley, Bo Levi Mitchell, Willie Jefferson, these really high-end guys, if you're kind of in the middle or on the lower end, you might almost be smarter to sign now and take your chances and gamble on yourself.
What makes me wonder too, Joel, is Marvin Miller used to say this a lot when he was with the Major League Baseball Players Association. The owners advocated make everybody a free agent every year, and this was when there was no cap, mind you, but Marvin Miller would say no. You want supply and demand. You want there to be a lot of teams pursuing a finite amount of players. So guess what? Toby Harrah could get rich via free agency.
Yeah.
When you've got this many free agents, there's not really supply and demand. There's a lot of there's elite players, but there's so many elite players. Again, it's almost like your fantasy draft. You know you're going to get somebody good, but there's the supply and demand isn't there. It's like if I need an impactful linebacker, well, there's actually quite a few of them out there. Mm-hmm. If I need an impactful receiver, there's a ton of receivers.
Yeah.
But where's the supply and demand? Is anybody going to be able to really break the bank when there's a lot of players who are comparable looking for money as well?
No, and then that's entirely fair. I think from the players' side, this feels like this is their shot to finally get something out of this, because we've seen them roll over time and time again, and even the last time around, they did a little bit too, and I think we were all expecting a little more of those CBA negotiations after that big TSN deal, right? And it never really materialized. And some sense I'm getting a little bit is this might be, if there's any CBA negotiations in this league history that causes some cancellation of some games, this might be the one.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the sides get a little more entrenched than we've ever seen before. And I know a lot of people say, it's the CFL. Eventually these guys, the tensions will rise and the risks will come because, the Americans making their low money need to work and they need the money.
And they have no built-in attachment to this union.
Yeah, and they're not Brennan Labatt making his, money, and he's probably got a little bit of a nest egg now and he's fine, right? And I get that. But it's for the first time also, their executive isn't exclusively basically Canadian offensive linemen.
Yep.
There's a few other voices on that board for a change. And I feel like we might be heading toward maybe at least missing some preseason games.
And that's what should have happened in 2014.
Oh, absolutely.
The union they capitulated so quickly. And I
remember Ricky Foley being furious about that.
The Riders as a team voted against that. They were the only team to vote against that deal. And the union just bailed out so quickly that you would think that would, down the road, 5 years down the road, steal their resolve to be more militant might be a strong word, but certainly more unified and more vigilant about making sure they get something.
Yeah.
I mean, it was embarrassing last time. The league came forward and they said, well, this is the best we can do. And not long after, a year after that, the Riders are firing a GM and a coach with 2.5 years remaining in their contracts. And, we have no problem paying that off.
Yeah.
And the Toronto Argonauts certainly will lose money on their operations this year, but how much are they paying Mark Trestman not to coach? So these teams have money. Some they just choose not to spend it on the players. You look at the size of some of the front offices in the Canadian Football League, and not just in Saskatchewan or in some of the centers that they're wealthy, but they spend a lot of money on people who aren't playing the game. That money should go to the players. There's got to be a redistribution of wealth within the CFL, because it's ridiculous. If you were to do a list of 20 highest paid employees of Canadian Football League teams, how many of them would be players?
Not many.
And that's sad.
You'd get like maybe like a Mike Riley and a Bo Levi Mitchell. Yeah. Maybe you're odd. There might be an offensive lineman in there somewhere. Canadian offensive lineman, which sorry, like we love those guys, but they're not the ones people are paying to watch.
But it's automatic that even a bad head coach is going to get $250,000 now.
Yeah.
And so your average GM is going to get $250,000 now. Your coordinators are going to get well into the hundreds. And but the players who they're paying to see, if you're paying a head coach $400,000.
Well, the word was wasn't Mark Trestman making like 600?
Yeah,
or something allegedly.
Well, if that's what Mark Trestman's making, then Ricky Ray should be making about 1.5, based upon the scale that's established in other leagues. If you look at the highly paid coaches, even in Toronto with Mike Babcock's making big money for a head coach, but you look around the National Hockey League, there's tons of players making more than Mike Babcock.
Yeah,
and there's tons of players in the National Football League making more than Bill Belichick. So why do the coaches and coach GMs make the highest salaries in the Canadian Football League? It's the players. They're putting themselves on the line all the time. They're the product. They're taking the risks. They need to get the bulk of the salaries. And I like this football operations cap because it at least puts a damper on some of the excesses that are happening. But now I think that the football operations cap in and of itself can't be the check on teams paying a lot of money to coaches, etc. They've got to realize the players are the product, and the players got to push for a big cap increase and have some sort of resolve and some sort of unity that will enable them to get more than an incremental increase like they did last time.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely what has to happen. I think it's time for that to happen. And it's funny, I think the conversation in sports over the last number of years has changed in that regard. I remember, during the old NHL lockouts, the one every 2 years that they have or whatever, there was always the conversation that, I remember myself being a fan at the time, you're always on the side of the owners because you believed in this, this, and this. And now as kind of we've learned more about professional sports and the industry's evolved a little bit, you're seeing, I think, a shift more away from fan support toward the owners, towards the players, is the grand scheme of things. Because they're like, okay, these guys have short careers. They should maximize every single penny that they should earn. That's especially true in the CFL, where they're making a fraction that they do in other professional sports.
Well, there's a lot of cases where the people sitting in the stands are making more money than the people they're watching.
Yeah.
And again, that excludes the quarterbacks and some of the other marquee performers.
Well,
but by and
considering
large,
the prices of other sports leagues, that's true as well. When you have like billionaires buying suites at NBA games and whatnot too, right? So that's not a CFL exclusive.
If you're the fan, you can relate to the CFL player, and I think they're a bit more of a sympathetic character in this production compared to, I remember the first NHL lockout. There were players arriving at negotiating sessions in these fancy sports cars, and then they're trying to pass themselves off as trade unionists.
Yeah.
It was comical, and it's just marginal players that looked very affluent, and they're trying to make a case for being disadvantaged. Like, give me a break. But in the CFL, I think the cause is obviously one that a lot of people are going to sympathize with. And this is the time, like you said, for the CFL Players Association to really make some inroads, because who knows what the environment's going to be next time a contract comes up. Who knows what the TSN money is going to be.
Yeah.
And that could change everything.
2021, so that'll probably be about the middle of this deal. So they'll have a few years after to decide what they do there. And along those lines, maybe a little off topic, but I've been along of a champion that I think the league would do itself a service by not being exclusively on TSN. I think they need to be on another broadcaster as well to provide a little bit of legitimacy in that regard, to allow, because we know in today's media landscape, especially in broadcasting, whether you own broadcast rights or not affects a lot of your coverage. And so I think the CFL, especially if they're going to go to 10 teams and have 5 games a week, I think it would help if they had a game or two on someone else. Whether that's Sportsnet, and my dark horse is still Global, because I don't think Shaw is spending the kind of money they have been on the CFL just for fun the last number of years. Yeah. I feel like they've been playing the long game a little bit in that regard. So, what I think, and that might help. That will help both broadcasters push each other and get better. And that maybe TSN's value drops a little bit, but maybe they increase it overall by going across more than just one network. And that's not to take away anything TSN's done for this league. They've been vital. But at some point, you need to make that business decision for the league.
And you wonder if the economics are there for somebody else to do that. You wonder how much extra TSN is paying for the privilege of being the only broadcaster. Yeah. And are they paying a premium to have that status? Suddenly, if they're not the voice, does that affect the overall revenue? How much of a bidding war could there realistically be? If Global is in there or another network, it wouldn't be like CBS and NFL, NBC and Fox.
It's not on the same scale.
In terms of the degree of interest, not the amount of money, but the degree of interest. If TSN is going to be the major player regardless, everybody else is sort of hovering around the periphery. What I wonder is, are they going to get that kind of money again?
I don't know.
The way the league
is trending. We saw the Grey Cup this year. Granted, it was an uninspiring game between two kind of uninspiring teams outside of their markets. The ratings are down 23% this year for Grey Cup.
Yeah.
If it continues and we continue to see it kind of flatline like it has been in ratings for the last while, even if it is only on TSN in the next deal, I don't know if TSN comes back with the same money. Now, it might be more because of inflation, but in terms of the overall revenue picture to the league, it might be the same or maybe even less.
And what is TSN's financial situation?
Yeah.
I don't think when this current deal was being negotiated, they anticipated losing hockey. What effect has that had on the wherewithal that they have to make a huge bid?
Well, given the amount Rogers paid, that probably helped their bottom line.
But there's the cachet of losing hockey.
Yeah, there is.
And of having hockey, and that was a big deal for TSN. And obviously there was some revenue that presumably would have counteracted the immense expense. TSN is a different beast now than it was last time the CFL television rights came up for negotiation. And what do they look upon the CFL as their big remaining linchpin?
They should. They haven't been.
They haven't watch SportsCenter. Yeah. CFL's generally relegated.
And you only and I don't want to sound like I'm pooping all over them, but if you watched throughout the regular season, the games are okay. But then you watch the games in the playoffs, and especially the Grey Cup, the broadcast is so much better.
Oh.
And you're like, if they put half of that effort into every single game during the regular season, I think it would help the product immensely. It would make it look bigger, it would make it look better, rather than just here's a few cameras and the same announcers every week and all that, and no pregame show like ever.
Yeah.
And part of the scheduling's part of that. If you have games on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, you can't really understand finances. You don't want to run pregame shows all that time. But if you had again, this comes back to scheduling in a sense, if the CFL could ever figure it out where they had only double headers on Fridays and Saturdays, you have two pregame shows. I don't understand why there aren't more pregame shows.
Yeah,
to hype this up a little bit.
That's their baby.
Yeah,
and to me, the thing that really bothers me, I don't want to get on a TSN rant either, but I will. You watch SportsCenter and off-season news just gets really, really buried.
Yeah.
On SportsCenter, and this is TSN is the network of the flagship network for the Canadian Football League. There's been times when a Major League Soccer highlight package or something pertaining to Major League Soccer has appeared well ahead of anything pertaining to the CFL. That's an instant goodbye as soon as the Major League Soccer comes on, and I haven't heard anything about the CFL. I think within the confines of SportsCenter, I think they need to create the impression that the CFL is a big deal, as opposed to automatically deferring to Leafs highlights.
That's instant analysis. There's nothing you can do about that.
Instant analysis of the World Junior camp, which leads to another camp, which leads to another camp, which leads to a pre-tournament game. I think the CFL really needs to be bumped up within SportsCenter.
Yeah, I think that would help. Do you think the story out of Hamilton today should lead off on SportsCenter with the news that Orlando Steinhauer has been moved in as the head coach and June Jones, which is staying around as offensive coordinator? I thought that part was a little interesting.
That was interesting.
But was this a move Hamilton had to make?
Well, June Jones, I think, brings a lot to that team. Mm-hmm. Being a sideline tactician is not one of them. Oh. We referred to the BC game earlier, where that affected playoff placings too. Correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't the Edmonton Eskimos in the playoffs if the Hamilton Tiger Cats don't blow that one?
possibly. I would have to go back and look into the math. But
I mean, that was a huge decision that affected a lot of people and a lot of teams. But what's June Jones's area of expertise? It's the offense. Oh, just let him worry about it. Yeah. Don't have him deciding whether to kick field goals late in the game.
Yeah. Clearly, I think he was in over his head a little bit in terms of the head coaching duties during the middle of a football game. There was some weird things that got away from him, especially there was in the playoff game where he called the timeout with no time left on the clock in the end of the half rather than...
I mean, that was a mistake?
Yeah, that was a mistake because they ran the sneak the play before, didn't get it. You should call the timeout instantly. You have time for 2 plays now if you pass. Instead, he basically put all his eggs in one basket. For them, it worked out and they got the touchdown. It didn't matter in the grand scheme of things because they did nothing in the second half. But it's just little things like that have added up. And the fact that you have this guy waiting in the wings
and you got to keep him,
and has interest from around the league, you have to roll the dice with Orlando at this point, I think, because okay, there's no guarantees that he's going to be a good head coach, but you would rather he fail with you than go succeed somewhere else.
Exactly. And there's been so many people knocking in the door, and he had left and come back. So this was your chance. If you don't make him the head coach now, forget it. And there certainly wasn't a compelling case to adhere to the status quo in Hamilton with regard to the head coach. But I think you have to look at that offense and the development of Jeremiah Mazzoli and the potential of that offense if he has a receiving core that's healthy for an entire season. I don't think you want to lose what June Jones can bring to your organization, but I think you want to find somebody else who's on the sidelines deciding what to do in key situations, because that's where June Jones really failed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I there's no doubt that the guy can coach offense. That offense is good, and they might have beaten Ottawa. They might have won that division had Brendan Banks not get hurt. That was how big he was to that offense and everything they did. So, yeah, I think it is.
And they'd already lost Jalen Saunders.
They were the Calgary of the West. They just didn't have Bo Levi Mitchell as their quarterback, and so. Yeah, like that offense is good, and he can coach offense, and it speaks a lot to where I guess he's at in his career, and this the character of June Jones. There's a lot of guys. I'm sure if you have the ego of some head coaches, if the team approached you and said, "Okay, we have this guy that's been whatever he's been a consultant or whatever for the last year. We want him to be our head coach in the future. We think now is the time to make the move. Would you be willing to be downgraded to offensive coordinator?" How many guys are going to say yes in that scenario? Like longtime head coaches, guys, or, how many guys are going to say that? I don't think many guys are going to say that.
Yeah.
So they obviously had the right guy to get that scenario where they can continue to build their offense and get the offense where they want it to be and still get their guy at head coach. So that will be a really interesting thing to watch in Hamilton next year. Is it a long-term thing? Probably not. I mean, both their coordinators are combined like 140 years old. So, I mean...
I know the feeling. My knees are a combined 140 years old.
So, yeah, I mean, next year, that'll be interesting to watch in Hamilton. And for Orlando's sake, I hope it works out because he's a good guy and a good coach, and he's been waiting, and he deserves this shot.
We've asked for questions from readers, and we got 2. Just exploded.
It's more than I get on my podcast.
So. One of them pertained to Rough Rider quarterbacks. I think we've addressed that. A reader asked us, if you know the answer to this, great, because I don't. What if the teams that decided to put staples in their cleats at the Grey Cup, a la 1977 Grey Cup, is it still permissible for teams to use staples as a form of... I don't
think so. I mean, this is a league that fines players who are in the wrong colored shoes. Because I remember at the start of that game, William Powell was wearing these bright orange cleats. And all of us in the press box are like, oh, he's going to get fined for that.
Yeah.
And then in the second half, he came out in white cleats. So I don't know if he's just trying a different thing or if he got told, take those off or we're fining you.
So yeah, staples would
I would imagine that's a no-go. Probably also for like player safety reasons on top of just general uniform rules. But I feel like that would probably be a no-no.
And they were improvising in 77.
Oh, yeah.
What do we do now?
Those were different times. That whole field fiasco comes back to just a failure on so many different levels that it's been talked about ad nauseum.
It really, I don't even know what more could be said on that topic. It just boggles the mind that, and you know what I'm sick of, Joel? I'm sick of people saying, well, both teams had to play on it.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it right.
No,
that's your stage.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't think it's not a reflection on either team. To me, it's a reflection on the league. It's a reflection on, I assume, the city of Edmonton that takes care of that field and does all the work there. And it's a reflection. Yeah, it's a reflection on everything. And because for what I heard, it sounded like there was basically snow sitting on that field for 2 weeks before they cleared it off for the Grey Cup week. And it's like, okay, yeah, the Eskimos didn't make the playoffs, and generally when that happens, you shut down, but you're hosting the most important football game in this country in 2 weeks. Maybe clear it the week, before the week of the game. Give that field some time to dry out a little bit. But they didn't do that.
And the league blew a marketing or an advertising opportunity too, because they could have sold ads on the Zamboni.
Yeah. Well, I was joking with CBC's Devin Haru was there, and I was like,
Devin Haru is a great person.
Yeah, and we were saying it, like, well, I guess they should bust out the grippers in this one because it's like a curling rink out there.
Yeah, it was quite the spectacle. And you know what? I've watched every Grey Cup since 1971, and which is amazing because I'm only 32. And that's the only one where I found it abhorrent to keep watching.
And there was no rhyme or reason for it because
it should have been
last year in Ottawa. There's like a lot of snow or rain or something. The
96 game was a classic.
You get it, but so there was a lot of snow in Ottawa the year before. That wasn't an issue, really. 2013, it was like minus 30 all week here. It was -1 on game day, so surely there would have some freeze thaw that day. Wasn't really an issue.
Second quarter, I just decided I don't want to watch this anymore. This is really bugging me. So I put the radio on and listened to the radio broadcast until the Williams punt return for a touchdown. Then I thought, I should probably see what this looks like. And I don't really feel like I was deprived of anything for better part of half a game that I just listened to it in the radio. It sounded way more, it looked way better on radio than it did on TV, I'm guessing. So
kind of like us.
I wore my best $25 stained whatever this is. So
yeah,
Joel, we've reached that time where if we had a closing theme, we would tease with it. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we compensate you very modestly and send you on your way to the mean streets of Regina?
No, I think we're good. We covered enough with a whole lot of nothing happening really this week, other than it's very important that the Riders re-sign Brian Jones.
It absolutely is. The lobby and the posters are being produced as we speak. I'm asked as a matter of obligation to read this. Please rate us on iTunes and leave a review, unless it's not flattering of yours truly. It helps us grow the podcast. So there, leave a review, and help us grow the podcast, which has now reached 30. Joel, thanks so much. You'll reach 30 one day too, and you'll feel half my age. So
I'm over there.
Tell people where they can send their emails to.
Oh yes, Mark Melnichuk chimes in from the studio audience.
The smartest guy in the room.
The smartest guy in the room. He can, if you have any emails with questions, comments, whatever, they can be sent to me. My address is rvanstone@postmedia.com. That's rvanstone@postmedia.com.
Can I just say before we go that this was Barry McCormick's best episode
Wasn't
of this
he
podcast?
great?
He was phenomenal today.
It's about time we had a Steeler fan in this chair who made eminent good sense. And so and was young. So Joel, thanks so much for being with us. Joel Gasson of 3 Down Nation. I'm Rob of No Known Affiliation, and we'll do this again next week. Thanks for being with us, and take care.